Hello. This is going to be an episodic series on how to use Notion formulas. But I also don't want it to be too dry. I don't want to just show you the syntax of every single function and then that's it. So by the end of this video, we will actually create something that is useful, that can turn into a template that you can click on down in the description. What this template is going to be is a project management dashboard of sorts. We're going to create a tasks database and a projects database, connect them, and see what we can do formula-wise. As well, see what formulas can do when roll-ups are in the mix. Even though this is a singular use case, we're going to go through a ton of functions. And those functions are dateBetween, now, round, ceil, and floor, sign, less than and greater than, if statements, unaryPlus, unaryMinus, absolute, contains, format, and toNumber. First, let's create that tasks database. Let's go inline table, tasks, call this task 1, just so we have a placeholder. And let's go all the way down to task 7. In this tasks database, we're going to use checkboxes. We're going to have 4 different processes. So we're going to have a discussion phase, then we're going to have procedures. So these are the steps to get the task done, review, and finalize. And at the end of this, we're going to have something called complete, make it a formula. Let's put a percentage sign after this, because that's what we're going to return, a percentage. Let's go down and create a projects database as well. So inline projects, let's say there's 3 projects that we're working with. I want a deadline, date property. Now let's put in some dates. We'll just leave it like this for now and add to it in a bit. What unaryPlus is going to do, and if I click on it, I can see here exactly what it does. It converts its argument into a number. So you're gonna have unaryPlus and then the value inside these parentheses. The value could be like this example here, 42. And it'll give me 42 as a positive number. Now if I were to go unaryMinus, which is another function, it will give me negative 42. Going back to plus, I can also put in here something like true, and that will give me the numerical value of 1. If I put in false, it will give me 0. As well, if I do something like this, prop, which is short for property, and I also give it 2 parentheses coming in here, and put the name of the property inside, like discuss, it will give us a 0 because it is toggled false. If I were to toggle it on, it would say 1. I can also add all of these together and go unaryPlus prop discuss plus unaryPlus. Also, when you go to type a function, it will show up here. If you click on it, it'll give you that parentheses open. Also, if I were to write prop, I can come into my properties here and pick one and go procedures, and it will finish the line for me. And then I will close everything out. What I'm doing is closing out this function. Now if I tick both of these, it will say 2. If I were to just tick 1, it would say 1. So now we're adding up these checkboxes. So let's fill in these checkboxes before we continue. All right, now I also want to add these 2 over here, and we'll just do the same thing. Plus unaryPlus prop and review. Close the parentheses, and then do another one, prop final. Now that we've added all these checkboxes, I want to return a complete percentage. So most people know about this very simple equation, but to get a percentage, just in case for people who don't, you're adding up every single property and dividing it by the amount of properties altogether. So we're going to divide this whole thing by 4. Now if I were to just simply go divided by 4, this shouldn't say 3.25, it should say 1, because 100% of these tasks are clicked. The problem is, I did not isolate this here. I want to isolate the sum of all our checkboxes and then divide it by 4. Now that we're here, we go to this 1, 2, 3, click %, and you have percentage complete. This is a pretty clean return. You don't have any decimal points, you don't have any weird numbers. But let's say you do. Let's say there's 6 properties. And if we were to do the same thing and add these, so take away these parentheses here, and we're going to add these 2 extra columns. property column plus close all these out and divide it by 6, we're going to get numbers like this. So to fix this, I have to use a function called round, and that's going to round the number. So the round function, let me just copy this and delete it, is going to be round and open parentheses, close parentheses. Everything inside of here will be rounded. So if I say 5.6, change this to number, it should round up to 6. If I say 5.2, it should round down to 5. There's two other rounding functions we can use here. We can use the function ceil, which is going to always round the number up. So 5.2, even though in the round function would round to 5, with ceil would always round up to 6. And the opposite would be the function floor, which will always round the number down. So going back to this, let's round it. And I'm going to put open parentheses and then close parentheses at the end. So now the issue with this is that it rounds it way too dramatically. And if I were to go to percent, it would all be 100%. I'm going to use that round in between this round function and the rest of the formula. I'm going to put in 100 times. And then at the end here, I'm going to go divided by 100. And that will give it a cleaner roundup. I can adjust this by adding zeros. So I can go 1,000 and 1,000 at the end, and it moves the decimal point 1 space. I could do 10,000, and so on and so forth. 100 is usually the cleanest outcome. So let's delete these, get back to the original use case, get rid of these two, and go divided by 4, and I'll keep that round in there. Now let's set up this project's database and see how we can connect it. I want to connect it to the tasks. To do that, I'm going to create a relation called tasks and relate it and we'll call this up here projects. Bring it over here and start filling it in. Say in project 1, it relates to task 2, task 3, and task 7. For project 2, tasks 1 and 6. And for project 3, tasks 4 and 5. If you go back up to the task database, you'll see all the projects that relate to each task, as well as all the tasks down here that relate to each project. Before I go in and work with those, I want to show you another formula. This formula is going to tell me if the deadline is in the past, in the present, or in the future. As well, I want to find how many days are remaining if the date is in the future. Once we find out if it is past, present, or future, and how many days are remaining, I want to combine these two formulas so that they both fit inside one cell. So this cell at the end should say blank number of days have passed, or blank number of days remaining, or today. First, let's figure out how many days are remaining. To do this, I'm going to use something called dateBetween. So you use dateBetween when you want to find the value between two separate dates, either from two separate dates in one date range, two separate dates in two different properties, or between one date and right now. For this formula, we're going to work with that deadline and right now. How dateBetween works is you're going to plug in the first date, the second date, and then you're going to tell it what value you want to return. Do you want to return the years between these two dates, the quarters, the months, the weeks, the days, the hours, the minutes, the seconds? So it goes dateBetween this date, comma, that date, comma, in this value. So the first one's going to be right now, and the now function works like this: now and open parentheses, close parentheses, dateBetween now and property, deadline, in days. So you can see 21 days remaining on this deadline that is actually in the past, and it's saying we have -7 days remaining for a date that's in the future. Right now that I'm filming this, it's September 3rd, so September 11th should not be -7 days away. It should be 7. The reason why it came up this way is because I didn't order this properly. It should be prop deadline here, and now should be here. The reason for this is because what you're essentially telling it is, I want to find property deadline minus right now, not now minus deadline. So now that we have this, if we look at the deadline for September 11th, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Technically, yes, there's 7 days between 3 and 11. However, when it comes to deadlines, I wouldn't really say that there is 7 days remaining. I would probably say that there's 8 days remaining. Like, for instance, if I say tomorrow's the deadline, it will still give me this 0, but there's really 1 day remaining. That's because I'm returning full number of days. When I'm filming this, it's 6:22 p.m. It would only be a whole day if the deadline was on the 4th of September at 6:22 p.m. or later. If I go to include time, you'll see it says 12 a.m. and it always defaults at 12 a.m. whenever you put in a date. Instead of seeing the number of days between two dates, we're gonna find the number of hours. So instead of saying days, I'm gonna put in hours. Now I'm simply just gonna divide this by 24 to give days. What I'm going to do is use that round function, except this time I'm going to make sure it always goes up. So I'm going to use that ceil. Instead of 7 days, now it gives me 8. If I go to tomorrow, it will say 1 day remaining, 2 days for the 5th, 8 days for the 11th, and 0 for today. You can see that going backwards it did not change because it doesn't need to. There's no issues with going back in time. So that doesn't really extend the original dateBetween formula too much. You're just adding just a few more elements. You're adding that ceil. You're making sure it says hours instead and dividing it by 24. So again, if we were to compare this with the original and say days, -21 is the same, but going forward we do add a day. However, if it is today, it will always stay 0. Yesterday will be -1, tomorrow will be 1. But in the original formula, it stays 0. Now I want to show you another function called sign. What sign does is tells you if a number is negative, positive, or 0. So if I were to put the same formula inside of the sign function, dateBetween deadline, and now in hours, put that ceil in front of it, divided by 24. It will give me a -1 for anything in the past, a 1 for anything in the future, and a 0 for anything that is today. So if I were to go 4, it would say 1, 5, it would also say 1, and so on. This is very similar to the unaryPlus and minus. I just wanted to show you how you can also do it with dates using the sign function. You can also go sign 4, and it'll give you a 1 because 4 is a positive number. If I say -4, it will give me a -1. And 0 would just give me 0. Now let's return if the date is in the past, present, or future. The property deadline equals, and equals will always be a double equals. Greater than will be the greater than sign, and less than the less than sign. So if I go prop deadline equals now, wouldn't that work? Well, it doesn't work. If I were to just put in now by itself, it is also giving me the time. So 6:30 p.m. is not equal to September 3rd, 2020 at 12 a.m. Now, how to get around this is with the formula we just made. Going ceil dateBetween prop deadline, and now in hours divided by 24 is equal to 0. And it will be checked for today. If I were to go to tomorrow, it would be unchecked. Find if the date is in the past, I'd go prop deadline less than now. Pretty straightforward. This down here will, of course, be checked. We're going to make sure this is unchecked in the final formula. And greater than for in the future. All right, so we obviously have some issues here that we need to resolve. We need to resolve today and make sure that in the past does not trigger today as well. So the end result, I want this box here to say past in text, and this to say future, and this to say today. To do this, we're going to use if statements. So how if statements that are just one line, like let's just say if property number is 1, I want it to just show 1. I would open parentheses and go property number equals 1, question mark. So if property equals 1, then show 1 as a text value, colon or otherwise. So if it is not 1, I want it to show an empty space. Close it out. It does show the number 1 here, but not here. If it's a string of if statements, you're going to go if, open parentheses, this, then show that, and, with a comma, if this, show that, and if this, show that. Now, if not, this is also written with a comma, then show a false condition. And then close the parentheses 3 times because there are 3 if statements. So let's fill all of these in. So let's do 2 to start. Close it out with 2. Let's say if 2 is greater than 0, I want it to show me A. On the other hand, if 3 is greater than 2, I want it to show me B. Otherwise, I want it to be empty. So you see that they all say A. Even though 3 is indeed greater than 2, it will never show B because A comes first. So if statements work in a hierarchy, first thing that appears is what is going to override something that may also be true in another segment of the formula. If I were to switch these two around, it would say B. I can also replace these with properties. So if property number is greater than 2, I want it to show A. Or if property number is greater than 0, I want it to show B. Otherwise, leave blank and 2 parentheses to close it out. So it's grabbing now this property here. 4 is greater than 0, but B would not apply because A comes first. Let's say I want to add another condition that goes if property number is equal to 2, show me C. And add a third parentheses at the end because we have a third condition. This C would not show up for 2. It would still be B because B comes before it. If I want to make sure it shows up as C whenever it is equal to 2, I have to make sure that this comes before B. And now C appears. Usually if you're trying to find things that are greater than or equal to or less than, always put the equal to at the beginning of the formula, just to get it out of the way, and then go down and do your greater thans or less thans. Now going back to here, past, present, and future, we're going to use that if statement line. So if, we're going to use that ceil, date between property deadline and now in hours, okay, divided by 24, close this out. If this is equal to 0, which would be today, I want it to show today. Next will be if property deadline is less than right now, I will say past, and if property deadline is greater than right now, future. Otherwise blank, and close it out with 3 parentheses because there are 3 conditions. Now we have past, future, and today. If I were to change this to the 4th, it will say future. If I were to change it to the 2nd, it would say past. So now let's combine these two elements. So first of all, before we copy this into here, I don't want this to say -21. I don't want it to say -21 days have passed. I want to say just 21. With that, I'm going to use the absolute function, and that's ABS. That's giving you the absolute number. Just close that in, and we'll get 21. The next issue we're faced with is that this property is a text value and this property is a number. So if I were to go down here and calculate it, I could calculate the sum. Numbers and text don't really mix. I want to make sure that this number is a text so I can combine it with past days text. To do that, I'm then going to go in and format this. In the format function, just wrap it around. we'll make sure it is a text value. And if you look down here to sum, it is no longer able to calculate these numbers because they are now text. So if I copy this, go into here, and what we want to do with this piece of formula is add it to just past and future. So instead of just saying past, I want to say days past. And between these two commas is everything that appears in the cell. So I'm just going to go ahead and paste that formula in, space, and add a plus sign. So we have that piece of formula from over there, plus days past as a text. What I'm going to do is add a space before days past inside of here so that it looks neater. I'm going to do the same thing right here in the future box. And now we have 8 future. And instead of future, I want it to say space days remaining. Now I have no need for this. And now we've minimized this database a little bit. It is ideal to combine a bunch of different properties that don't need to be separate into one cell like this. Now what I'm going to do is add some emojis. Let's say for today, I have a red triangle. For days past, I could go with back emoji. And days remaining, soon. The next thing I want to do is create a rollup. And I'm going to call this complete. Come down here to rollup. What this rollup is going to do is let me peek in to this task database and grab another property. So I'm going to use tasks since that's my only relation, and I'm going to grab complete. So what this is doing is showing me all the completes that correlate with tasks. What I want to do with these numbers is find the average. What this is going to do is let me know what percentage of the project is complete depending on the completion of the tasks. So if I go to average, project 1 is complete because all the tasks are complete. This one is about 37.5% complete, and this one's at 75% complete. So that's a trick that you can do with percentages. I'm going to use that property to return another formula. Let's call it action. This is going to be the last formula. Let's write out the conditions in plain text. Let's say if today is the deadline and under 100%. So it's due today, but there are some tasks that need to be complete. I want to label this with urgent. Now it's nice to write out these conditions if you have a lot before you go in and write a formula, so you just have your thoughts together. The next condition is going to be if deadline is within 8 days and under, let's say, 50%, I just want it to return priority. So we're going down the list of urgency. First, I want to focus on what is due today. Then I want to focus on what is due within or equal to 8 days. And then the last is going to be if complete. I want to return something called archive. What I'm going to do is go in and create a filter only for archived projects, so that whenever this cell populates as archive, it will automatically to that other view, so you won't see it here. This view is only going to be for active projects. First of all, I want to know if this property here contains the word today. Contains function. You want to tell the contains function if within this property or this value this occurs, then it will return true. So if within property past, present, and future it contains today, I want it to return true, and it does. I could also say, does it contain true, or does it contain, I can say contains property past, present, future, days remaining, and close it out. Now both of them are checked. You could also say and, in which none of them use both days remaining and today in a single cell. I also want to isolate the number in this property. I want to isolate 8 and 21. To do this, I'm going to use the toNumber function. So toNumber, and I'm just going to put in that property past, present, and future, and it's going to just grab any numerical values in there. We only have one, and that's all we need. So this function will be useful. So now that we know about all these functions, we can start making this formula. First of all, we need to make sure that this contains today. And if prop complete, that rollup, is less than 1, I want to say if this is the case, then return urgent. You can also say if contains in property past, present, and future, days remaining, and we need to make sure it is either equal to or less than 8 days remaining. So I want to say that toNumber for property past, present, and future less than or equal to 8, and property complete, that rollup, is less than 0.5. If this is the case, I want it to return priority. The next if statement is going to be if property complete simply is equal to 1. I want it to say archive. Otherwise, leave it blank, and we'll close that out with 3 different parentheses. Alright, so we made a mistake right here in this toNumber. We forgot to close it out. So if we're to isolate this, you'll see that there is a parentheses here to open toNumber, and then I have property here. What I need to do is close it. Now let's test it. So if this is the 12th, it'll be 9 days remaining, and we would have no action. 11 would be priority. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, and 4, all priority. And 3 would be urgent. Alright, cool. Now that we have that, let's make sure every single time it says archive, it goes into a different view. So let's call this archived, and make sure, go down to filter, add filter, action contains archive in all caps. And what I would probably do here is actually turn this into a list. You don't really need all those properties. And maybe put in the deadline and days passed. And in here, if you also just want to see active projects, you can also filter that action does not contain archive. We can do the same thing up here and say complete, make it a list, filter this so that everything in complete is equal to 1. In default view, let's change the filter to anything incomplete that is not equal to 1. So now that we're done everything, here's how I would use this. I would turn tasks into a page, go into it, and I would favorite it over on the sidebar here, and then I would go into something like a dashboard to keep my projects, and I would keep it in this view, and I'd be able to add tasks to projects, and I'd be able to see overall completion, and I'd be able to see deadlines and action tags, but you can do whatever you'd like with this. One last thing, I'm going to add this cute little GIF to the icon. You can add GIFs to icons. I'm going to go add icon, link, paste in this image from Giphy that I found. That was pretty cool. Now, if you want to add this to every single one, I'll create a template called new, link, paste that image in, go to project 3 and new. Let's turn this back into inline, go to default, and you'll see it over here as well, these cute little emojis. What I'm going to do is try to go through every single function in the function list through these examples like this. The next episode is most likely going to be a workout planner. So if you're interested in that and interested in formulas as well, that will be good for you. Subscribe if you haven't already to keep up to date. And I will link this template down below like I always do. And I'll see you guys next time.